The spring transfer portal window is officially open, and Notre Dame has already had 2 players announce that they're leaving, including the son of an NFL Hall of Famer. With more movement likely on the way, who stays, who goes, and who should the Irish look to add? It's coming right up.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome in to Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. My name is Wojciak, and I'm the host. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports, and today is Thursday, April 17th. Thanks for making this your first listen of the day. Please remember to hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts if you have not done so already. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Okay. The spring transfer portal period opened up on Wednesday, and it runs through next Friday, April 25th. We have already seen some big moves across college football, like former Tennessee quarterback Nico Iamaleava committing to UCLA. And at the time of this recording, which is 8 p.m. Pacific time on Wednesday night, this is going to come out Thursday morning, right around 7 a.m. Eastern. Notre Dame has already experienced 2 defections, sophomore safety Kennedy Urlacher and senior long snapper Reno Monteforte. By the time that you're watching or listening to this, there might be more movement, but today we are going to react to the departures that have happened and discuss what they mean for Notre Dame in 2025 and beyond. We're also going to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. College football is in the midst of a major transition, with roster limits likely shifting toward a hard 105-man cap and the traditional 85-man scholarship limit, plus walk-ons on the way out. Teams like Notre Dame are going to be forced to make tough decisions. So today, I'm going to take a position-by-position look at who could still enter the portal, not because the sky is falling, but because this is the new normal. Plus, I'm going to break down where Notre Dame might need to add players before the window closes. Now, do I love speculating about college kids' futures and things like that, who could leave and who might not? I don't like it at all, to be honest with you, but these guys are getting paid now. These programs are run like pro teams, so this is just the reality of the situation, whether we like it or not. But let's talk about Kennedy Urlacher, because he was the first person from Notre Dame to enter the portal. Reno entered his name later on in the afternoon on Wednesday, which isn't really a surprise at all because he was repping behind sophomore Joe Vinci during the spring game. There's really only one long snapper that has a spot on this team, so he was not going to have a role, at least a starting role in the team this fall. So his departure was not surprising. As for Erlacher, this isn't exactly a bombshell, but it's still noteworthy and a little bit disappointing because I think he has a lot of potential. Looking back, though, Erlacher did not participate in the spring game, and there was really no mention of him suffering an injury or anything like that. So that should have been a red flag, but I just totally missed it. I didn't even consider that he was going to be someone entering the portal. So how big of a loss is it? Well, he played in every single game as a true freshman on special teams, and he showed some really nice flashes on defense against Purdue. He played a lot more than I expected he would as a true freshman because despite the last name, he was a pretty low-rated 3-star safety out of Chandler, Arizona when he was in high school. He was not even a top 600 prospect nationally, according to the 24/7 Sports composite, but I give Erlacher a ton of credit for being a gamer from the moment he stepped on campus, and he fully forced his way onto the field. He's a physical kid. He plays with a lot of intensity, and he made at least 1 tackle in 13 of 14 games last season and really just seemed to carve out a nice role on special teams. He logged 128 special team snaps and 65 snaps on defense, according to Matt Freeman from Irish Sports Daily. So those aren't massive numbers, but for a freshman, that's a really solid foundation to build on. And he had a really nice game against Purdue. He had 3 tackles in that one, had a pass breakup during garbage time. I really liked what I saw from him in that game. He wasn't out there a lot, but when he was out there, he was all over the ball. But context is important, and that Purdue team was absolutely terrible. So we should be careful as fans to not just take that one example and assume that's what he's doing all the time in practice or that's what he's going to do later on in his career. But still, that was a really impressive showing in just his 3rd college football game. Marcus Freeman mentioned in a press conference, I think it was during last fall, that Kennedy needed to work on his practice habits, which is pretty typical of a true freshman. But I think when you read between the lines there, that's probably, the coach kind of calling out the player to some degree to make sure that he's a little bit more consistent in practice. So if we're trying to figure out more reasons why he left, I think that is certainly part of it. But it is a loss, right? Like, let's not forget, he's the son of Brian Erlacher, an NFL Hall of Famer. So the pedigree is there. The instincts are for real, and I thought he had a chance to be a multi-year contributor at Notre Dame, especially in the box safety role later on down the line. And former Notre Dame defensive back Jordan Clark raved about Kennedy Urlacher this fall. He said, quote, "I think physically Kennedy has every tool to be a first-round safety. He's very explosive," end quote. Now, sometimes older guys like to hype up the young guys a little bit, but I did think that quote stood out. So why did he leave? I think this is just a classic case of a really talented player getting squeezed out by a really talented depth chart. Kennedy wants to play now, and I don't think he was given much of a chance to start alongside Adon Schuler, because everyone knows Adon Schuler is going to be starting for Notre Dame this year. And then Notre Dame brought in Virginia Tech grad transfer Jalen Stroman, who didn't practice this spring due to injury, but he was brought in to play real snaps this fall. He was not brought in to be a backup, although it is technically possible that one of these guys could beat him out, like what happened last year with Rod Hurd. The only difference is Rod Hurd mostly played nickel when he was at Northwestern, and he was converting to safety, whereas Jalen Stroman was a safety at Virginia Tech, and he's going to be a safety at Notre Dame. Like, he doesn't have to really change positions in the same way that Rod Hurd was expected to do once he came over to Notre Dame. And Stroman is a grown-ass man. He has proven himself to be a really good college football player when he's healthy. He's got 111 career tackles to show for it. So most people, myself included, expect Jalen Stroman to start once he's healthy enough to do so. But behind Stroman and behind Schuler, there's a bunch of really good competition. You've got Luke Talich, who's a year older than Kennedy Urlacher, and he had a great spring filling in for Stroman. He led the blue and gold game with 9 total tackles, and he was all over the field. He also has the ideal size that Notre Dame wants at safety. He's 6'4", 213 pounds. He's also earned the trust of the coaching staff because he's been around longer. He understands the defense, and even with a new defensive coordinator and Chris Ash, I think that they trust him a little bit more back there, and I think he's a little bit more athletic than people give him credit for. And speaking of athleticism, Tay Johnson, who is in the same recruiting class as Kennedy Urlacher, has been really rising fast this spring. He was one of the best athletes. He is one of the best athletes on the entire team, I should say, and really flashed quite a bit in that Jersey scrimmage a week before the spring game. And I think the coaches really love Tay Johnson's potential. He was a high 4-star recruit coming out of high school, one of the biggest gets in that class for Notre Dame. And now that he's got a home at safety, I think the sky's the limit for him. He might be pushing for like some major playing time in 2025, not just as a rotational guy. And then behind those two guys with Talich and Tay Johnson, you've got early enrollees like Jadon Blair and Ethan Long. They're in the mix, plus 2025 signees, Brandon Logan and Dallas Golden. They're arriving this summer. And then there's Ben Minnick and Tabron Benny Powell. So could Urlacher compete with these guys? Absolutely. He's probably better than a few, if not the majority of those guys that I just mentioned. But considering his desire to play now and the amount of talent in that room, his playing time was going to be limited no matter what. And there's also something else to consider here. Urlacher is undersized compared to pretty much everyone else I just mentioned. Kennedy is 5'11", 195. Jalen Stroman is 6'1", 204. Luke Talich is 6'4", 213 pounds. Tay Johnson, 6'2", 193. Jadon Blair, he's a freak. He's 6'5", 204, has a ton of length. So clearly, Notre Dame wants some size and length back there to go along with explosiveness, and Urlacher has the explosiveness, but he just doesn't have the size. And I hate saying that because I've been undersized my whole life. I'm 5'9", 170, but I was like 150 pounds when I played football in high school. So I hate that it works against Urlacher, but that's just the reality. So yeah, it sucks to lose a guy like him, but this is not a red flag. It's actually the opposite. This is just what happens when your roster is loaded with talent and the competition is fierce. Like, Notre Dame's safety depth has been a real question mark in years past, but now I think it's a legitimate strength, and you don't want to lose quality depth like you have in Kennedy Urlacher, but when you've recruited well, you brought in the right transfers like Jalen Stroman, and you develop your own guys, these decisions are just part of the deal. This is the price of a healthy program. Guys want to play. When that path gets murky, sometimes they move on. So this is not a knock at all on Kennedy Urlacher. I totally understand his desire to play football, and it's not a knock on Notre Dame either. This is just the new reality in this game that we love. I'm always going to root for this kid because he's a physical safety. He's got a ton of upside, and he's definitely going to find a landing spot, potentially USC. which is where things get a little bit tricky there. I saw Tom Loy from 24/7 Sports put that out on Twitter, but wherever he goes, he's going to compete for playing time. I hope he thrives and continues to develop wherever he goes because, when you are the son of a Hall of Famer and you don't really get that many looks out of high school, you're constantly going to be trying to prove yourself, and I think Kennedy did that in his 1 year at Notre Dame. But if anything, this is just a reminder of just how well this coaching staff has built the roster. The safety room is in really good shape going into 2025 and beyond. And Schuler is your established guy. Johnson looks like a potential star. Jalen Stroman is a guy who's going to come in and contribute right away. And there's a wave of young talent behind them. So Notre Dame is going to be just fine at safety. So that's the latest on Kennedy Urlacher. Coming up next, we're going to shift gears here, look at the offense and where there are still some big decisions about who might leave and whether Notre Dame might need to go shopping in the portal. That's next. Today's episode is brought to you by Upwork. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more, experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. If you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivered incredible results. Posting a job is free and simple, and within a day, with multiple qualified candidates to choose from. Instead of hiring full-time, Upwork helps find affordable, top-tier freelancers to scale my business efficiently. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today. Okay, let's do a little check-in with the offense. Who could leave and who might join? And we start with the quarterbacks. Okay, so who could leave? This has been a topic that has been discussed, debated on pretty much every single Notre Dame podcast, YouTube show, whatever you want to call it. It's been discussed in print as well. And personally, I have gone back and forth on this a bunch of times. And I apologize to the everyday listeners who are like, this guy can't make up his mind. Well, going into the spring, I predicted that Steve Angeli would start against Miami, and then I thought CJ Carr would eventually become the starter during the regular season. And I also predicted that Kenny Minchey would be the odd guy out, and he was the one most likely to transfer. Then last week, I was like, you know what? I think all three of these guys might actually stay because I think they all have a chance to win the starting job. And if one of them has a chance to win it, they're probably not going to leave. Well, as we sit here today on April 17th, I think one guy is going to leave, and I think that's going to be Steve Angeli. I think CJ Carr and Kenny Minchey have the upside, they have the potential, and they have proven themselves to be ready to go and start in college. I'm not ready to say who's going to win that job between Kenny Minchey and CJ Carr, but unfortunately for Steve Angeli, I do think he is going to be the odd man out. I could be wrong on this, obviously. Maybe he decides to say, but as we sit here this morning, I really think that is what's going to end up happening. And the reason I went with this is because Notre Dame prioritized upside over experience on the offensive line last year going into Texas A&M. They started Anthony Knapp at left tackle over Tosh Baker, who's a fifth-year senior, and Anthony Knapp was a true freshman who had never even played in a single college football game. Then they started Sam Pendleton, who was a redshirt freshman, over Pat Coogan, who started every single game the year prior to start at left guard. And you know what? That worked out all right. Is it a little bit more risky to do at the quarterback? Yeah, probably. But I think Notre Dame is going to do that again. I think they're going to prioritize upside, ceiling, potential, all of that over someone who has been there longer. And I think that means Steve Angeli is going to be the odd man out. Now, should they add? No, absolutely not. Unless, for whatever reason, Angeli and Minchey decide to go, which I think is highly unlikely, then they might have to add someone to be the backup to CJ Carr in that scenario, but I do think that's unlikely. I think Notre Dame is going to be just fine with Kenny Minchey, CJ Carr, and Blake Hebert as the three scholarship quarterbacks going into this year. And then you know what? You could always bring Tyler Buckner back from the wide receiver room to the quarterback room just so you have another body in that room who has actually played quarterback at the college level. Now, as for the running backs, who could leave? I mean, honestly, anyone not named Jeremiah Love, to be honest with you. I don't think Jadarian Price is going to leave at this point. I think he may have considered it when the season was over, but he decided to come back, and Jaywan Sider, the new running backs coach, has already proven that he knows how to balance a two running back system. He did that perfectly at Penn State with Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. So even though Notre Dame has Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price is going to get plenty of touches as well. Could Aeneas Williams leave? Yeah, he could. I mean, I understand that being running back number 3 when you're as talented as Williams is tough. I still think he should stick around because next year he's going to be Notre Dame's feature back, and he is going to have a role on this year's team. Now, I think he might have some skepticism about his opportunities, given the fact that Dylan McCullough was the running back coach last year, and he loved to rotate a bunch of guys. Jaywan Sider is more on the 2 running back system with a third guy coming in a little bit. Maybe Aeneas Williams wants to be the starter somewhere else. He could certainly do that, but I do expect him to stay. Kedron Young is another guy who could leave if the top 3 guys decide to stay, but I think, if he sticks around, it's going to be him and Williams next year as the top 2 backs. So, I understand why any of these guys would leave, but I also think that they should probably stay and that it's in their best interest. And I'm trying to be objective as I can about that because obviously as a Notre Dame fan, I would love for all these guys to stay. But Jabron Payne seems like the most likely person to leave unless Williams and or Young decide to leave because he's the guy who's been around. I don't think he has the ceiling, the potential. He has less years of eligibility, so he could probably go somewhere else and get some playing time this year. He's coming off that season-ending injury that he suffered last spring. And Nolan James Jr. looks good for the future, so I think Notre Dame is going to be just fine no matter what happens with this running back room. So long as Jeremiah Love doesn't leave, which I don't think is going to happen at all. So they're not going to look to add. I feel like the running back room is in great shape. This is one of the deepest and most talented. I think it's the deepest, most talented position group on the entire team. And unfortunately, they're probably going to have to deal with some attrition here in the coming days. Now, as for wide receiver, right now they have 16 wide receivers when you include walk-ons. So there's probably going to be some attrition here. The room is pretty imbalanced after the transfers that happened after 2023 when Rico Flores left and Braylon James left. So the only guys, though, that I could really see transferring right now are KK Smith and potentially Cam Williams, although I don't really know what the Cam Williams market is at this point in time because he was a really highly touted recruit coming out of high school, but I think there's still a lot of football maturing that Williams has to do here. KK just makes sense because he's going to be a junior, and I think he might have already been passed up by early enrollee Elijah Burris this spring. Burris really flashed, and the staff is really high on him. And you know that Notre Dame is going to rotate 6 guys at the position consistently. Mike Brown, the wide receivers coach, has said as much multiple times, and 4 spots are taken. Malachi Fields, the transfer from Virginia, Jane Greathouse, who finished last season exceptionally strong, Jordan Faison, he's obviously cross-training right now with the lacrosse team, but he's absolutely going to be in the mix next year, and Will Pauling. So you've got 4 guys for 6 spots. That leaves 2 spots open for KK Smith, Micah Gilbert, who missed all of spring with the broken fingers, Logan Saldate, who the staff is really high on, Cam Williams, I already mentioned him, or any of the 3 early enrollee freshmen. But I think out of those 3 early enrollee freshmen, Elijah Burris is the only one who has a realistic chance of playing time this year. So when you consider all of that, I think KK is the most likely to leave because he's older. The staff is very high on Micah Gilbert and Logan Saldate. And like I said, Elijah Burris might have already passed him up. So there wasn't a big enough move, at least from my vantage point, that KK Smith made during spring that would solidify him as that 5th guy. So maybe he leaves, maybe he doesn't, but that's some guy that I'm going to be keeping an eye out for. I don't think they need to add anyone because they already got Malachi Fields and Will Pauling. I think those are the 2 best transfers that they have ever gotten out of the transfer portal at the wide receiver position. I would take Fields over Bo Collins, Chris Mitchell, and Jane Harrison last year. So I think the receiver room is in some good shape, but 16 is a lot of guys, man. There's going to be some movement there. Now for tight end, I just don't really see anyone leaving because they just don't have that many bodies in the room right now. Every single guy in that room is going to have a chance to contribute in some capacity this season. Eli Raridan is going to be tight end 1, and Kevin Bowman and Eli Raridan are going to be gone after this season. Cooper Flanagan, meanwhile, is going to miss this entire season because he ruptured his Achilles in that playoff game against Georgia. So, behind them, you've got Jack Larson, who's the only guy on scholarship who's on the team right now. You've got Henry Garrity, who's a walk-on as well, and then Ty Washington is the transfer from Arkansas who arrives on the team this summer, and then James Flanagan coming in as a true freshman this summer. So I just don't really think there's any candidates here to leave other than the walk-ons who might get pushed out because of the scholarship limit. And, with Jack Larson, he's a little bit undersized, but I think he's a really good pass catcher. Notre Dame is going to want him later on. Yeah, he's a little bit undersized at 6'3", but he made a really nice catch in the spring game. That's something you saw a lot on his high school tape. So I would be pretty surprised if anyone in the tight end room leaves other than the walk-ons. And personally, I think that they should add someone at tight end, just another body for depth purposes, considering all the injuries that have happened to the guys in this room. Eli Raridan has had 2 major knee surgeries. Kevin Bauman has a laundry list of career injuries. Cooper Flanagan is out for the year. Ty Washington got kicked off the team at Arkansas. So there's not a ton of reliable guys in the room right now. So I think that they should go out there and add someone, but Marcus Freeman doesn't seem to have that much interest. That's at least what he said in the press conference after the spring game. But Eli Raridon is the only legitimate receiving threat in this group for this season. So if he gets hurt, I just don't know how much they could trust the other guys in this room. Maybe they're just really hoping that James Flanagan, the true freshman, could come in and compete right away. I'm certainly holding out hope. I think that he actually can do that because he looks like he's physically ready to go as a true freshman. But I think there's just a lot riding on that, and it's a little bit of a risk to not add anyone in the transfer portal at tight end, just given the injury history of the guys playing that position. And finally, the offensive line, who could leave? I mean, pretty much anyone outside of Anthony Knapp, Emil Wagner, Billy Strouth, Charles Jagasaw, or Gerby Lambert. Like, if any one of those guys left, I would be stunned. But any of the guys behind them, I wouldn't be shocked because there's a bunch of really talented guys in that room. And every single one of the names I just mentioned, Knapp, Wagner, Strouth, Jagasaw, and Lambert, they all have multi-years of, or well, not in the case of Wagner, they all have eligibility beyond this season, right? So Notre Dame could start like all these guys plus Ashton Craig this season, and then realistically every single one of them could be back and play next season. So, you know, if you're behind them, the path to playing time isn't great, but we have seen Joe Rudolph certainly mix and match before. He's not afraid to bench a guy who has experience for a young guy if he thinks that they deserve it. So Ashton Craig, you know, he might be at risk of losing his starting spot to Selvin Absher, but he's coming off the injury. I would be pretty surprised if Ashton Craig left, but his spot at center is definitely not locked in. Selvin Absher ran out there with the ones in the spring game. He's been fighting like hell to win a starting job, but if Absher feels like he hasn't done enough to earn it and he doesn't feel confident about starting this fall, maybe he could leave. And then any of those other young guys like Styles Prescott, who seems to have developed quite a bit, if he wants to get playing time somewhere else sooner, that's an option as well. But I definitely do not think that they should add on the offensive line because they have recruited that position better than anyone else in the entire country. So they have a bunch of talented guys in that room, a bunch of talented young guys. So wouldn't be shocked if we saw one key piece, I should say, or one guy who could have a chance at starting this year, leave in the transfer portal. But again, it's just like the Kennedy Urlacher situation. Like, there's just a lot of depth and a lot of talent in that room. There's only 5 guys who can play, and there's a lot more than 5 guys in that room. So I'm going to be looking at offensive line as a position where we could see some movement, but Notre Dame is not going to look to add. So overall, offensively, things feel mostly stable outside of the uncertainty around who is going to start at quarterback. But on defense, there's talent everywhere, but also a few rooms where one unexpected departure could shake things up. Let's break it down right after this. Today's episode is presented by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. So right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you will get $250 in bonus bet if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props. From three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. The Cavs are plus 490 to win the finals right now. Yeah, I'm a little bit biased, but I think this Cleveland Cavaliers team is really, really good. I know they didn't finish the regular season super strong, but they had already locked up that number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference for a really long time, so they didn't have to play that hard. They've been well rested. You know, their starters have not been playing a ton of minutes, and I really do think they have what it takes to win it all. So you can get them at plus 490 right now. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. All right, we've already talked about the defense a little bit on today's show, but specifically the safety room. We'll talk about that more here in a second, but let's really take a look at the rest of the positions on defense. Who could leave? Who should Notre Dame look to add? And we'll start with defensive tackle. So who could leave here? Well, you know that Jared Dawson, Gabriel Rubio, Donovan Heinisch, and Jason Onye are all going to factor into the rotation. I think the starters are going to be Dawson, the transfer from Louisville, and Gabriel Rubio, with Heinisch and Onye, the first guys off the bench. But you're also going to look at guys like Elijah Hughes, the transfer that they got from USC, and Sean Sevillano Jr. looks like he's ready to make his mark, although I think he's probably like a year away from being a serious contributor. But still, those are 6 guys that you can expect to play this season. So behind them, I think Brennan Vernon and Armel Mukam are probably the most likely to leave, just given the fact that they've been around the program for a few years now. Some younger guys have beat them out. The fact that Notre Dame went out into the transfer portal and got a guy like Elijah Hughes, who is a reserve defensive tackle, he's not even expected to start, kind of tells you how they felt about the depth in that room. And then behind them, it's a mix of young guys who have a lot of eligibility left. So should they add? I mean, going into the spring, I would have said yes, considering I didn't think Jason Onye was going to be a real factor on this team. Obviously, he missed pretty much every game last season after the Louisville game, I think it was. I think that was the last game he played for the Irish last season, but he was able to rejoin the team. He's in good graces with Al Washington, the entire coaching staff. It seems like the team has welcomed him back with open arms as well. So I don't really think they need to add anymore because honestly, if you're going to go out in the spring transfer portal window, you're probably not going to find a real impact player at defensive tackle. The best you could probably do is like another Jason Onye. So the fact that they have Jason Onye back, like I think they're probably set at defensive tackle unless there's a surprise and a couple of guys leave. But I feel pretty good about this position. Certainly a lot better than I did going into spring practice because I think Jared Dawson is going to hit. And if Rubio can just stay healthy, he showed what he could do last season when he had to come in for Riley Mills. Like I think he has a ton of potential. He just hasn't really been able to put it together for a full season. So, Vernon could leave, Mookum could leave. I thought Devin Houston was a guy who could leave, but then he switched over to the offense. I mean, he certainly could leave as well. But I feel like the defensive tackle position is in good shape. I think the defensive end position is even better shape. Who could leave? Look, this is a loaded position. And honestly, I'm going to go out and say I think we're going to see a surprise at this spot because there is just so much talent in this room, both at Viper and strong side end. So you've got Jordan Botelho, Boubacar Traore, Josh Burnham, Bryce Young, and Junior Tuihalamaka. Every single one of those guys I've just mentioned, they've already proven that they are really good or good enough to play, certainly. And in the case of like Traore or Bryce Young, like they look like future NFL players. And then you've got a guy like Logan Thomas, who's going to be a sophomore in this upcoming season. He's ascending behind them. And Cole Mullins has looked good every time he's been out there. He had 5 tackles in the blue gold game. You want to rotate on the defensive line for sure, but that's a lot of guys fighting for 2 spots, and I don't think Bryce Young is going to leave at all. I would be really surprised if they let Boubacar Traore walk because the sky is the limit for him. But other than that, I really would not be shocked if any single one of these guys decides to leave, like Jordan Botelho, Josh Burnham, Junior Tuihalamaka, go to some other schools, like they're one of the key pieces at defensive end, but on a team like Notre Dame, who is just loaded at defensive end, you're going to have to split some reps, and maybe they're fine with that. I think Josh Burnham is incredibly underrated. Jordan Botelho was having a great start to last season before he got hurt. Junior Tuihalamaka literally saved the season as a third-string Viper. He came in and was a steady, consistent player the entire year after Traore and Botelho got hurt. But defensive end is a premium position. It pays really well, and Notre Dame has a ton of depth. Now, should they add? No, and I don't think they will. Because if they were going to add, they would have looked into David Bailey, who is the really good player who transferred out of Stanford once they fired their head coach. Notre Dame didn't really entertain that much, and I think that tells you all you need to know. I don't think they're going to look to add at defensive end. Now, as for linebacker, who could leave? This is interesting, okay? Because Drake Bowen, Kingston Viliamu-Asa, and Jalen Sneed appear to be locked in at Notre Dame, and they are probably the top 3 linebackers in that room right now. I mean, they've already... Chris Ash and Marcus Freeman have talked about how Drake Bowen is like the leader of that defense, so he's going to be around, right? He's going to be your starting Mike. Kingston Viliamu-Asa could be unreal this season, and Jalen Sneed, now that he's bulked up to 238, the coaching staff is raved about what he's been doing this spring, and also I think Jalen Sneed really did consider leaving Notre Dame after this past season, but he decided he wanted to stick around and play his last season of college football at Notre Dame. So those 3 guys are locked in. I would not be surprised if anyone behind them left because Notre Dame really only has 2 linebackers on the field at the same time for the majority of the time. Yes, sometimes they're going to run a 4-3. You're going to have a rover out there on the field when you're playing teams like Navy who run the triple option or run heavy teams. They ran a lot of 4-3 against Penn State this past season. But the base defense in modern college football is 4-2-5, nickel. So that third safety is replaced by, in this case, Devontae Smith. There's just a lot of talent in that room. And if only 2 guys are out there at the same time, and most of the time it's going to be Bowen, KVA, and Sneed, there's going to be other guys who want to get a little bit more reps. So Jaden Osprey, for example, really talented player. I think, he could play either one of those linebacker slots. He can cover guys in space. He could start at a lot of other schools. And then you got a guy like Preston Zinter, who seems like he's caught in a logjam because, there's so much talent in this room. There's guys ahead of him. And then you got Matt Framo, the early enrollee freshman who comes in, and he's one of the top recruits in the entire country. So, anyone behind those 3 that I mentioned, I would not be surprised. You got other guys like Go Okia, Teddy Rizak, Bodie Cajon. They're a little bit further down the depth chart. I think, they could leave, but they were always considered developmental players to begin with. So I'd be pretty surprised if they left because it's wasn't the plan for you to always sit a few years and try to contribute when you could on special teams, but we're going to have to wait and see. I think we could see some movement at this position. Should they add? No, because they have 11 scholarship players right now to play 2, sometimes 3 spots. They are loaded at this position. I think it has a chance to be one of the best linebacking cores in the entire country, but when you have that many talented guys, it wouldn't be a shock if one of them decided to look elsewhere where they could get playing time a little bit sooner. Now, at cornerback, I just find it really hard to think of anyone leaving other than maybe Chance Tucker because he's older and he's already been passed up by younger guys. Like he missed this past season due to an ACL injury that he suffered in fall camp. Like Christian Gray and Leonard Moore are going to make up one of the best cornerback duos in college football. Carson Hobbs is probably going to be the first guy off the bench after a phenomenal spring. Other than that, it's like just freshen and Devontae Smith and Chance Tucker. So Chance Tucker could leave. Other than that, I think they're fine at cornerback. They added Devontae Smith in the transfer portal, so they're not going to look to add elsewhere. They're good there, and I think they're pretty good at safety now that Kennedy Urlacher has already made his decision. I could maybe see one more, like maybe Ben Minnick or Tabron Benny Powell. They could enter the fold if they want to play now. I only say Minnick because he's a little bit older. He's going into his 3rd year with the program, although he looked really good in the spring game and started to get some time on special teams at the end of last season. But he's just kind of caught in a logjam on the depth chart. Like I think Schuler, Stroman, Tay Johnson, Luke Talich, like they're all ahead of him. Right, and he's been around for a little bit longer. So he would absolutely be a contributor on special teams, but if he's looking to get on the field at safety, I'm just not really sure there's a path. And should Notre Dame add? Nope, they already did that with Jalen Stroman. So look, this is just the beginning. The spring portal window is open for 10 days, and we're through 1. So there's going to be some more movement for every single team in college football. But as of now, I think Notre Dame is in a healthy spot. They've developed talent, they built depth, and they are entering the transfer portal window from a position of strength. So we're going to keep you updated on any developments right here on Locked On Irish over the course of these next 2 weeks. But that is going to do it for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. I'm going to be right back here tomorrow morning to react to any more news we get out of the transfer portal. In the off chance that nobody enters between now and then, maybe I'll do like a fun top 5 Friday or something like that. But we're just going to have to wait and see how it plays out. If there's a big surprise or any huge move, I might do like an instant reaction emergency podcast if I'm able to do it. So make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube or wherever you listen to the podcast. So that way you never miss an episode. It might be a good time as well. If you are watching along on YouTube, click that alarm button so that way you get a notification the moment the show goes live. And if you enjoyed today's episode, if you're watching along on YouTube, please give this video a like, or if you're listening to the podcast, rate the podcast 5 stars and leave a review on your preferred platform. I know I ask you to do that in every single show, but it really does go a long way in helping us grow the show, and it just helps build the community. So I really appreciate everyone who's already done that. I appreciate you for tuning in today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you on Friday.